Alright, what is up YouTube? Welcome back to another Battlefield video. Today, what we're going to be talking about is I'm going to give you my perspective on the tank changes that DICE is talking about. I'm not going to bore you with the details, you all know what's up. I'm just going to talk to you about things that I saw that were interesting, and then later on we're going to go into what my vision for tank combat can be in Battlefield. So this is gonna be both kind of just giving you all like my feedback on the dev blog, and honestly this is a dream, but hoping if someone that can see this, can see the vision that I have for ground combat. I mean tank versus tank and stuff. And yeah, so to start things off, they mentioned something about most of their launchers or most of the equipment that engineers have able to three-shot people, able to three-shot tanks. My opinion on that is I don't think that should be the case. I think you should make tanks a 4 or 5 shot kill so that they won't get immediately exploded by like 4 or 5, 6 engineers shooting at them at the same time. This is a similar system you had in Battlefield 4. Mind you, I'm not trying to make the game Battlefield 4. Battlefield 4 is in the past. It is what it is. It's a good game, but I think having a similar system like that should be good, because if you are an engineer, you're running around, you bump into a tank, he doesn't have a gunner, it's just him, it's a 1v1, you don't want to feel hopeless, you know, you want to feel like you stand a chance, and it's just a matter of positioning, and if the tank can knock you out, if he's having a hard time aiming at you and predicting where you're going to be and stuff. I think that would be good, because it adds more survivability to a tank player, and it makes the 1v1s like engineer versus MBT feel a lot more better, you know. It feels more fun, more rewarding. I think that would be sick. And I think that's what I think about that. I think having tanks be 3-shot kills, let's say with just the RPG, obviously it depends on a bunch of other things like the angles and stuff, which we're going to talk to in a bit. I don't think it's good, because in any given moment in any given moment in Battlefield, you easily have like 4 or 5 engineers super close to wherever there's a tank. So if people just choose to unload on you with their rockets, you're just gonna explode. Especially if you plan to nerf the repairing, which I'm not against. I think nerfing the repairing is like really good, because, and this was another bullet point that I found interesting, is because now if you face an IV or an MBT with like 5 or 6 engineers in the back repairing it, they feel really unkillable. So I think they should limit how many engineers can repair a tank. And I think doing what you're gonna do now in terms of like you can repair a tank faster if it's critically injured, I think is really good. I think lowering the repair on the top end is also really good. And I think having tanks repair to full health when outside of combat is also solid. I agree with that. They no longer heal in like chunks like they do now, which I think is pretty cool. And I think you could take it a step further. I think because they did mention they want to do something with like angular damage and stuff, making it more predictable, which I think is super cool. The way I see it in my head is not only doing that, but taking account like the armor values of whatever vehicles you have in game. So right now we have, I'm only talking with MBTs, right? So right now you have the Abrams and you have the Leopard. The Abrams has a decent amount of armor in the front. Leopard does too, but like, let's say if you angle your, let's say I'm on the Abrams and I angle my tank 45 degrees to the right while my turret's facing forward, armor becomes thicker, and I think you can implement a little bit more of a deflect or a ricochet mechanic to help add a layer of survivability to skilled tank drivers, which is something I've been pushing forward, because tanks feel really fragile when they're by themselves. And it would punish engineers who just take bad shots. You know, you want to reward skilled shots. You want to force players to think about what they're looking at, how to knock it out. I'm not gonna go in like super in depth and be like, oh, you gotta shoot here to one shot. No, I don't want that. No, keep it within that 4 or 5 shot kill, right? But make it to where like the rocket impact angle or whatever it is, like an RPG, right? If it's bad, it can deflect or it'll ricochet. Um, and another thing you can do, because I know this is something else, something interesting that I saw as well, is that they want to take off the reinforced plating for MBTs. And my opinion on this, and I hope y'all agree with me, is I wouldn't take it away. What I would do is I would rework it and introduce an ERA mechanic. And for those of you who don't know, ERA is explosive reactive armor. They're those plates if you put on the reinforced armor on the Abrams. They're those things that you see on the sides. Essentially what they do is if it gets hits with an RPG, it'll detonate the RPG, nothing will happen to the tank, you'll be fine. The way I would do that into this game is I would make it in sections. So let's say every rocket has a certain amount of blast radius. So let's say, keeping that image of my Abrams angled at a 45-degree angle, my turret's still facing forward. Let's say an engineer shoots an RPG, hits the front left side of where the driver's at. Because it hits the ERA, it triggers it. The blast radius of that will set off whatever amounts of ERA in it. So now let's select that panel, that area is now exposed to another RPG hit, which will deal damage. Obviously depends on the angle, but that's what you want to go. And I would make it to where each section comes off its own way depending on the type of rocket you hit. Like it depends on the type of launcher you use, so, and the blast radius and stuff. So they have that added layer of defense on top of angling. Now obviously if an RPG hits a tank that's angled, that's not going to deflect. If it has ERA, it'll just trigger it and blow it up, you know. I wouldn't go specific to like, oh, if it hits this specific square, it's going to blow up. No, I would make it like blast radius would set off a certain amount of ERA, so it can mitigate a bit of damage, and it can make the tank driver conscious of where he's rotating and what he's doing, you know. Plus, it'll incentivize engineers to think about where they're going to place their shots, because let's say a tank driver just got off a battle with an engineer. You see his left side, his, let's say the front driver ERA on the side is like gone, the middle ERA is also gone, but that tank has a couple more, has like two more sections, right? You have like the area behind the driver, but not the center. Then you have the engine area in the back, not like directly in the back, like on the left side, right? You know that if you take that fight, you can deal damage because some of its ERA panels are gone. So you can take it up and you gotta aim your shots, incentivizing more skill and rocket placement and more skill on the tank driver so he can better adjust his angles and stuff, you know. I think that would be really sick. And I think keeping that for MBTs would be really cool. Obviously make it make sense. And another thing that I would do for vehicle combat, this is going into my dream, and this is where I'm going to start yapping a bit more. And let me know if you all agree. I feel like Battlefield can push the lore, because they want to build a universe, for those of you who don't know, or those of you who forgot. They want to build a whole Battlefield universe, which started in 2042. So a little bit of a video that I'm going to be working on is, I believe what we're seeing in Battlefield 6 is a prequel to 2042. I think everything that's going on now is leading up to the world collapse, the collapse of the great superpowers, the Great War, and all that other stuff. I think that's where we're headed. And I think what they can do now, right, is represent different nations under certain factions. So let's say Pax, right? Pax Armada, that's obviously Spain is there. The PMC is backed by Russia, China. So they have Leopard 2A4s, which is in the game right now. They can get access to T90s, and they can get access to a ZTZ tank. ZTZ, I don't know what number they're on right now, but you can, if you play Battlefield 4, you know the ZTZ tank, you know what it looks like. Think of something like that to represent China. And for IFVs, right now we have the STRF 09A4, I think, which is essentially like a Swedish IFV. But then also with the Russian faction, you can see their technologies. If you want to represent that nation there, you can implement either a BTR or a BMP3 with its own unique characteristics and what they bring to the game. And let's say for China, you can bring whatever IFV they have. I'm not familiar with Chinese hardware to represent different nations, right? Another thing too, so I know in Battlefield 6 lore, France left NATO. So let's say if they were to join PAX, if they weren't already a part of PAX, they would bring NATO technology to the PAX Armada side, and they'd get access to the Leclerc and a wheeled light tank or a wheeled IFV that's a lot faster. And let's say for the NATO side, right, let's say the MBTs, you have the Abrams, which is already in the game. You can implement the Challenger 3 to represent Britain, even though I don't think that's like the current MBT that they're on. I could be wrong. And then you can bring another MBT. Let's say, let me look through real quick because I had the name right now. You can bring a, where are you at? You can bring a K2PO Black Panther, which is part of the Poland-South Korea alliance. And what you can do is you can make them all fill different roles. So like let's say the Leopard and the Abrams, right? They're both versatile. They're good all around, really solid tanks. But then you have your brawler tanks. So you have your T90 tanks. You have your Challenger 3, and you have your lighter armored tanks, which are more faster, which would be the ZTZ. Give me 1 second because I have the information right here. Where are you at? The ZTZ 99A for China, which is more lighter, and then you have the T90, which is a brawler, like I said. And I would take it a step further, you know, I would make it to where each vehicle has unique characteristics, unique armor in certain areas. Each tank has different levels of armor thickness and all that other stuff. I would make it to where there's strengths and weaknesses to each side, right? To where, let's say, like the Leopard 2A4 and the Abrams both have negative 10 degrees of gun depression. Let's say the Chinese ZTZ has -5 or -8, and then on the NATO side, that what is it called, the Black Panther tank, that can have, let's say, -8 degrees to match China, and then the brawler tank, I think the Challenger will beat it in depression, but the T90 has a stronger gun. And I would make it to where there's strengths and weaknesses to each tank, right? So let's say the brawler's slow, but it can hold its own against multiple engineers. The Abrams is faster than the Challenger. It's still slow, don't get me wrong, but it's more versatile, right? And let's say the what is the KLP2, something like that, the Black Panther tank that I mentioned, that is faster, lighter armored, packs a decent punch, but because it's lighter armor, it can die quicker, you know. And then for on the pack side, let's say like the brawler tank would be like the T90, right? It can soak up more armor. It has an ERA on the sides and a little bit on the front, on the top part of the tank, not the top, but like the top of the upper plate. So it can tank a few rockets from the front. And the thing that would make the T90 tank unique was, like, even though it has like -3 degrees of gun depression, right? What you can do is, because it has a big gun, it can deal more damage to, let's say, infantry, because it's a bigger cannon. It has a bigger HE, has a higher blast yield. And I would make it to where it's like a powerhouse, right? Say if you shoot a tank with a 155mm, it's not gonna blow it up like in one shot. No, I don't want that. But it would definitely do significantly more damage compared to, let's say, like the Abrams, what is it, 120mm? But the thing with the 120mm is that it's faster, more accurate, to where the 155mm cannon on the T90 would have to lead more. And I would make it to where like shells just behave differently. I would make to where like the armaments of IFVs and MBTs deal a certain amount of damage. You know, there's trade-offs in strengths to each one of them. And I would take it even a step further, right? I would make it to where, like, if you want to push progression systems for vehicles, because once you unlock the general stuff, you can go into like the specific tank upgrades representing their faction. I don't know what they are, but like, let's see, when I push it, you can give each tank its own unique upgrades to make tanks even more unique, you know. What else? Let's say like the ERA is unique to the T90 and the Abrams. To make them all unique, and it's a good way to represent different nations in certain factions. And also, what you want to do is you want to incentivize players who play vehicles to be picky on what they want to bring to the battlefield, what a certain map needs, their play style and how they want to play tanks, and not only that, you're forcing engineers to think about what they're facing and how to knock it out effectively, you know. I want to bring back the rock paper scissors balancing that they had in Battlefield 4, but on this one I want to keep this also within ground vehicles, because I don't want there to be like a defining tank that you have to run on every match to do good. No, there needs to be strengths and weaknesses to all of them. And I think giving tanks their own unique characteristics, varying levels of gun depression, have their guns behave differently, have their shells behave differently according to the gun caliber, unique upgrades once you unlock the general upgrades to further boost progression in tanks. I think that would be sick. I think that would be really awesome. And as far as IFV goes, I would want them to be just as unique as well. You know, I mean, they're gonna be squishier. So if an MBT fires at a light tank, it's gonna take more damage, right? But like it brings its own strengths and weaknesses to, let's say, IFV versus infantry. So let's say you have the STRF 0984, which I'm calling the Clovis, which is a Swedish IFV. I think that has a 40mm gun, so that'll stand a good amount of chance against MBTs. It'll hit harder, slower rate of fire. But then you have something like the BMP3, which has a faster fire rate on the cannon, on the auto cannon. My bad. It can really mess up infantry, and it won't be able to do much against MBTs for balancing purposes, but it'll have access to like its own guided missile, right? What else? Say you bring in a BTR, right? That thing has a slower fire rate gun compared to the BMP3, but it's able to move a lot faster since it's a wheel. They can get around vehicles. It can use its unique gun to pen MBTs on their weak spots. I think stuff like that, you know, having dynamics like that, having layers of depth to vehicle gameplay would make Battlefield a lot better, make it a lot interesting. Right now I am only talking about ground vehicles because air vehicles is a whole kind of worms that I'm passionate about, but I don't want to talk about it now. And I think having things like this would be sick. You know, I have a dream for what vehicle combat can be for Battlefield, and I hope a DICE developer can see this and see the vision that I have, and if not in this game, implement it in future games. I am going to make another video talking about the lore, talking about how they can fix their live service and push a narrative and make the live service feel more fun and engaging. I would make it tie into RedSec and tie in the whole world, but that's going to be a separate video. As far as the tank changes go, like I said, it's a step in the right direction. I'm for it. I don't think tanks should be 3-shot kills. I think we should make it 4 or 5-shot kills. I want to see more skill implemented into vehicle combat. And when I say that, I'm talking about like ground vehicles. And I want there to be in the future, right, a representation of nations and their technologies according to the faction that they're fighting for, so NATO or PAX. I want each tank to have its own unique trade-offs, strengths and weaknesses, different gun depressions, all that other stuff. I like the engineer, not the repair Ooh. I want to say nerf because it feels like they're gonna nerf repairing, so I'm for that too. I feel like they can do more, but the thing is, it's very challenging repairing, adjusting repairing to where it doesn't feel so broken. Because you don't want to have tanks that feel unkillable, but you also don't want to feel like you're hopeless on repairing a tank because it's just gonna die either way, you know. That's which is where you go lean on the angular stuff and the ERA that I want, like the reinforced armor changes, make it to where it's ERA now for like MBTs and stuff. There's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of depth that I feel like I can bring to vehicle gameplay. So I'm hoping someone that guys can see this. It would be a dream. And there's more stuff I can mention, man. I can go on and on. I'm very passionate about vehicle gameplay in Battlefield that I think is super sick. I think adding skill to it and making engineers kind of just think about what they bring. And also, like, the reason I want to have different vehicles selectable within categories, because you have your MBTs, IFVs, and all that stuff, is because you want to give players more identity into how they play their tanks. If you want a front line, let's say Russia, you take T90. If you want to snipe or you want to be fast in an MBT, you have your ZTZ. You know, give people the option to select things that they need that suits their playstyle, and have engineers think about rocket placement and what kind of armaments they're using and stuff. I didn't touch up on everything that I want to talk about because I don't want this video to drag on super long. So if you watch this, if you see the vision that I see, if you understand what I'm saying, definitely leave a like, comment, let me know what you think, and let me know what you want to see for vehicle combat. Does your dream align with what I dream? How would you do vehicle combat? Leave it down in the comment below. Leave it down in the comments below. And also, if you have any more questions, because I have thought about this a lot, man. I feel like last night I was at work, man. I'm not even joking. I thought of like how to fix a live service, pushing the lore, pushing the narrative. I thought about fixing vehicle combat. Dude, man, I have like $1 million ideas. I'm not even joking. So I've thought this through. So I'm open to answer questions in the comments below should you see this. And yeah, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm sorry for the repeated sign-offs, but feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe if you are. If you did made it this far. I'm on the road to get to 100 subs. That is my dream by the end of the year. I'm hoping by the end of summer, but we'll see. And yeah, with that being said, stay safe. Love you all. And I'll catch you on the battlefield. Peace.